to 12 years of time that I have spent specifically on data, the prominence of what data can do to an organization, I don't think that case is lost. In terms of when it comes to the process of delivering good data on top of which you can build data insights, is you have to put processes. And when I say processes here, they have to be automated. And when I say that, it means that you have to actually invest in data pipeline infrastructure. So for us, I think somehow we seem to be seeking answer in terms of how we can work with data using SQL and a DSL built on top of SQL, along with the notion of batch.
Hi Jana.
Vasu.
As always, a pleasure interacting with you.
My pleasure too, sir.
Today mainly wanted to talk more about the data landscape. We see a lot of organizations and heads of organizations and CTOs very focused on leveraging the power of data. As someone who has been dealing with data for many years now, and particularly working on a lot of data-led initiatives in the last couple of years, I want to use this session today to understand your views on data and a few things that would be of benefit to the listeners who are looking at this, as well as what kind of inputs would help them to take from your views, your experience, and things like that. So let me start off this session by asking a fundamental question. Given the hype and hoopla surrounding all of data, truly tell us, what should organizations focus on, or what should organizations really look at when it comes to data?
Great question, Vasu. I'll try to do my best to answer the question. I think the value of data continues to hold a strategic importance, and as a lot of people say, data is new oil. I think that adage still seems to make sense. But however, in the last 10 to 12 years of time that I have spent specifically on data, what I've come to understand is there are always situations and occasions where companies and organizations may digress from what they want to do and end up doing things because they are fad. They give some level of attention. Things have also taken that route. But I think the prominence of what data can do to an organization, I don't think that case is lost. Now, to give you an example, somewhere between 2008 to 2012-13, there was insane amount of attention on big data and big data infrastructure. Companies like Cloudera, Mapper, maybe a lot of other companies just mushroomed. In another 3 or 4 years, there was no big opportunity or that big a need for organizations to set up these $1 million products to host information. So that's the point I have realized, which is there is definitely a need for organizations to take cognizance. They need to focus on data, but that does not mean that everybody is going to sit on hundreds of terabytes worth of data. So that is something that I wanted to add. To also add one other aspect is, we have been talking about this for quite some time based on our common sense, which is organizations need to have what we have been calling as data bank. Now, software vendors like Microsoft have kind of come out with their own terminology, and they have started calling them as data lakes. That's all right, but the idea is all organizations which have a clear-cut need and desire that drives them towards digital transformation need to definitely think about having a data bank that ties data that would originate from systems like email all the way till systems that are pretty core to their businesses. So any data which is mission critical or casual, if they can all be tied inside that data bank, the adage that data is new oil would definitely stand value for organizations. That is how I would sum up the answer for your question in terms of, does the data is the new oil? That is how I think your question was framed. Right. I think it would find value if organizations understand the real means by which they should go about setting up the infrastructure. So digital transformation journey that enables organizations to set up a data bank would definitely help organizations to see and derive value out of data, is how I would summarize my answer was.
Okay. Jenna, thanks for that answer. Now, you spoke about creating a data bank from emails to any larger system or anything. It could be from where these sources of data could all culminate and become the data bank. Now, the question or the succeeding question is about data quality, right? Not all data becomes the new oil, right? You need to identify the oil that is needed for your cooking
Exactly.
versus your, gas stations and things like that. So, how do we bring or how do we identify data quality or bring in quality in data?
This is a question that I think has become important for us, given the fact that we are dealing with one of the prospects in the last few days or so, and we have been doing some amount of introspection in terms of what data quality really stands for. Personally, what I've come to understand, based on whatever reading we have done, is data quality is something that you should strive to achieve by design, where you ensure that the practices that you put, the automation that you set up, the infrastructure that you can build to take care of certain aspects in terms of automation and software, only by employing these functions properly, you'll be able to have quality data. This is how I'm looking at the landscape, sir. I don't think it is an after the fact thought that you can employ, okay, I have got this. Is there a way I can assess my current data quality, and can I do something about it that will give me quicker turnaround in terms of improving the data quality? And I'm afraid that that is not possible. Let's assume that you're an organization who's mostly paper bound, because that is how you derive value. Then you have to definitely invest in image processing infrastructure as quickly as possible, rather than spending a lot of effort elsewhere and eventually realizing that you have lost opportunity to do this sometime before. Probably you should walk away from using paper and then do something else. But if you've got large cache of paper, what you do? So the point I'm trying to make is data quality is something that you address by making sure that you put considerable amount of effort in automation, whether it could be workflow automation or automating the process of extracting information from image. And that seems to be the best answer. But should we have some sort of an apparatus that could help you understand what data quality is? I wouldn't say no. But does organizations have good answers for them? I think even people like us, we are searching good answers for that. It still seems to be an unaddressed problem, so I'll accept that. I'm sorry, I don't think I have a good answer, but I have done my best to touch upon things that will enable you not to turn this question into $1 million question for an organization. Keep some check on this problem, is how I would characterize my answer.
Okay, but I thought, even forget for a moment about, the content surrounding data quality. For a moment, let's talk about the big data processing world itself, right? The moment you bring in big data and you start processing and you're trying to create insights and intelligence out of it, there itself there is a need for data quality. In fact, there is a structured way in which you process the data, and then you do things like feature engineering and things like that. Is there not a role for data quality within that process itself?
Well, let me spin my answer this way, sir, and you see if I'm making sense here. Most of the times, what I have felt where you address the quality aspect, whether it is software engineering or for that matter data, is you put watertight processes in place. And when it comes to software engineering, how do you address software engineering quality is you have continuous integration and continuous delivery practices helping you to kind of at least have a watertight processes around which you can spin a lot of other effective systems. For example, test automation is something that you can integrate with the CI/CD processes. And if that is how we can deal with assuring quality on delivering good software, when it comes to the process of delivering good data on top of which you can build data insights, is you have to put processes. And when I say processes here, they have to be automated. And when I say that, it means that you have to actually invest in data pipeline infrastructure that helps you to do proper data ops, so that you solve integration problems and you also solve pipeline problems, maybe both of them together, so that you set up a proper data ops infrastructure. And that way you can guarantee quality by design. is how I would revisit the question that you asked.
I think that's exactly where I was getting to. So
Okay.
you spoke about MapR, Cloudera, and all that in the big data world. Today, it's a data pipeline world where we see a lot of companies in that space, right? I don't want to name companies, but every other day we talk about companies, that are talking about building a data infrastructure and things like that. Talk to us a little bit about why organizations need that kind of a data pipeline or a data infrastructure. And you have always been a big fan of domain-specific language. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Since I have spent insane amount of time trying to solve this problem, one of the things that I have realized right from the beginning is operating with data, especially operating with data in large quantities, seem to be a kind of a problem that is different from, for example, how you do mobile development. Why? There are certain aspects to batch problems that are characteristically different from how we would approach other problems. So one counterintuitive thing that we have learned over a period of a time is you can do data processing, especially large volume data processing, by streaming. Now there is this architecture called as Lambda architecture, where they talk about streaming layer, where when you have got data streaming, you process data as it comes, and there is huge amount of investment in today's world where you see a lot of companies that have spent considerable amount of their effort building streaming infrastructure. But I also have seen the other side of the world where the problem can be solved by doing batching. Now, though I value what the streaming world has done from a value addition standpoint, if you see Linux as an operating system, it has this interrupt drivenness that is a little interesting for me, which is when you send multiple escape inputs through your keyboard to Linux, it does not treat all of those interrupts as individual interrupts. Okay. It basically batches all of them together, and then sometimes it considers all of them as one single event, or batches all of them together and then see what it needs to actually do for all those events. So when operating systems that are as robust as Linux, when they treat a batchiness with that level of reference, then it also puts us in a place why we shouldn't see building data pipeline infrastructures in a manner where you deal with batchiness as a first order function. Now, tying that with DSL, the kind of DSL that we have invested on is inspired by SQL. And SQL is the best DSL that's out there in terms of dealing with data that I know of. There are other options that we have, but SQL seems to be it seems to stand tall and pretty unique in terms of how it can operate on data. So for us, I think somehow we seem to be seeking answer in terms of how we can work with data using SQL and a DSL built on top of SQL, along with the notion of batch. If you look at RDBMS and if you look at SQL, they have always complemented each other so well in terms of dealing with batches of data using SQL. So that is the premise from which we are at least approaching the problem of batch, the problem of data using SQL, and build a pipeline infrastructure, and that would enable you to take advantage of all these inspirations that I just now talked about, so that we can come out with our version of the answer that solves this data ops problem with all these things taken into consideration.
Okay. So are you saying that organizations need to take this kind of an approach, which is the data pipeline on top of which you use a DSL and then something like SQL, so that what sort of benefits you think they attain by that, as opposed to using a proprietary model of doing things?
Great questions. See, one of the things that enables people, especially large enterprises, to take this route is, if we look at any enterprise right now, I would be surprised if none of them, or if not majority of them, hosted on either Oracles of the world or MS SQL servers of the world or MySQLs of the world. The likelihood of we meeting an enterprise which is not invested on RDBMS is very unlikely also, which means that you will have phenomenal existing knowledge base that knows how to deal with SQL based systems and that deal with a lot of data. So which means that if we can build a data pipeline that is having considerable amount of sympathy to this architecture, they would be willing to consider this as a route rather than coming out with some proprietary technology that tells that it is so away from SQL, but has got insane amount of value. For organizations of our size, it might be a little difficult to sell that sort of a value proposition. But for what? I mean, if we can build an infrastructure that is as good as these proprietary architectures or infrastructures in terms of non-functional requirements, also in terms of taking advantage of the existing knowledge base, I think that is the best way to allow brand new technology, help people transition in, from the existing systems that they have. Is how I think we should proceed with the future, Vasu.
Okay. Talk to us more in terms of the data pipeline process itself, Jana. What are the different stages within data pipeline infrastructure processing?
I think the older technical stack, or the older best practices that the data warehouse people have given to us still holds good to us. So I don't see a lot of difference in terms of how that needs a change given the today's scheme of things. Probably, as I said before, in the scheme of Lambda architecture, there might be certain things that you would want to do as data streams towards the the source of truth data store that we have. We may have to bolt some unique infrastructure there, but even there, a system like Spark, which is the darling for people who want to do stream-based processing, even they have significant investment in SQL. So I see nothing wrong with we setting up an infrastructure where you want to process even streams of data using SQL. But keeping that in context, the older world, from a best practice standpoint, said that you do extraction first from disparate data sources, which means that you ensure that whatever pipeline infrastructure that you have has considerable number of adapters that will enable you to talk to either FTPs of the world or some proprietary file system or REST API systems or databases or NoSQL databases or proprietary API calls that you need to do. Make sure that from the data source standpoint, you have considerable number of adapters that can help you to ingest information. That needs to be complemented by what we have always been recommending, which is to have a staged event-driven system, which is, one of the things that I think the stream systems seem to have either taken lightly or I'm not aware of is, I don't see a notion of events tied to payloads and offering some level of batchiness to events and payloads. But that is something that we need to learn as an inspiration from the existing best practices, which is when you have to deal with large amount of data, we are talking about terabytes worth of data, you're always better off if you ensure that you stage your processes through events and you have payloads that are tied to events, and that way you'll be able to process them if there is a need to reprocess them and take them through stages where you have clear control over the processes. These are the two things that come to my mind. Plus, whatever practices that the existing ETL systems offer, I think we should also embrace them. Is how I would answer this question.